Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Polito. I'm the Neighborhood Affairs Director of the City of Miami Beach. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to have a community meeting tonight to go over a proposal that will be going to the Planning Board for 1960 Normandy Drive. For today's presentation, we have Mr. Michael Belush from the City of Miami Beach's Planning Department, who's going to kick us off, and then we'll be hearing from Nicholas Rodriguez. In today's meeting, at the end of the meeting, there's going to be an opportunity for questions or comments that you have on the project. And we'll go through that as we get to that point. I do want to recognize our mayor and elected officials that are joining us this evening. From Mayor Stephen Miner's office, we have Blake Govin. From Commissioner Tanya Bott's office, I see we have Sarah Murillo. And then from our Vice Mayor, Laura Dominguez, Aaron Serrano's on, as well as Monica Mateo Salinas from Commissioner Alex Fernandez, and Luis Atencio from Commissioner Joe Magazine's office. So thank you so much for joining us. And if I missed anyone, please put your hands up. We have quite a few people today. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael to kick us off. Michael?
Thanks, Kevin, and good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Michael Belush, Planning and Design Officer with the city's Planning Department. I'm going to provide some opening comments and remarks before I turn it over to the developer for their presentation. Now, we're here tonight because we have an application from a private developer to increase the maximum allowable floor area, which is essentially the maximum square footage that can be built on a site for the property located at 1960 Normandy Drive. This increase is associated with the workforce housing development. Now, whenever anyone, including the city or a private developer, makes an application to increase the maximum floor area on a site, a 6-step review process is required. The first step is the initial planning board review. This occurred on April 25th of this year. The second step is where we are today, which is the community outreach meeting. This is to solicit comments and feedback on the proposal. The next step, step 3, is review again by the planning board, where they will make a recommendation to the city commission. The planning board is scheduled to hear this again on June 25th of this year. And anyone that's here today is welcome to also attend the planning board meeting. But we will provide a summary of the comments provided today to the planning board for the review at the June 25th meeting. After review by the planning board, the next step is review initially by the city commission. After that, there'll be another second community outreach meeting. And then finally, under step 6, is the adoption by the city commission or rejection of the application. Now, in addition to the increase in floor area, an increase in density is also proposed, along with an increase in height and reduction in parking requirements for accessory uses on the site. With that, I'll turn it over to Nick Rodriguez on behalf of the developer for his presentation.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everyone, for making time in your evening to be here tonight. I promise I'll try not to take too much time with the presentation and leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So as Michael said, my name is Nick Rodriguez. I'm an attorney representing the applicant and from the firm Burkow, Riedel, Fernandez, Larkin, and Tapinas. The applicant is Jaquil LLC, owned by Alan Wasserstein, who's a local Miami developer who's developed other projects here in Miami, and this is his latest on a property that he's owned for many years. And to get started, I'll share a screen so you guys can see our presentation. Great. Do you guys see the presentation up on the screen?
Yep, you're good. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm joined by our project team who should be there in the participant list. Our design architect, Adam Fons, our traffic engineer, Tom Hall, our civil engineer, Max Kaplan, and our client, Alan Wasserstein, should be here as well. And you guys should know it takes a whole entire team to put a proposal like this together because we need to analyze everything from traffic to water and sewer impacts in order to propose a project that's going to increase floor area and density within the city. So what we proposed is an overlay zone on Normandy Isle. And what we consider this is to be a realistic proposal for workforce housing. Recent reports have indicated that Miami-Dade County is up to 90,000 units short on the demand for workforce and affordable housing. And the problem of not sufficient affordable and workforce housing has reached such a critical level that the state has actually preempted local government laws, and we're actually moving towards kind of a statewide zoning because it's just so difficult to develop workforce housing. What this is an alternative route to the Live Local Act. It is not a Live Local Act project. It is a proposal that we feel is within the context of North Beach and takes advantage of a site that is really ripe for development of workforce housing. So with that, I'll show you guys where the overlay zone applies. So here the overlay zone applies within the CD1 district on the west side of Normandy Isle. So you'll see all of this yellow is residential multifamily. This pink is CD1, it's commercial zoning. And within that pink area, this green area, this property is where the overlay applies. It only applies to this property, and it only applies to projects that provide 100% workforce housing like this one proposes. So to zoom in a little bit more on the property, it's right on the south side of Normandy Drive, right across the street from the Walgreens. We're kind of sandwiched between the Normandy condominium here and the Rue Granville apartments to our east. And this site has historically been used as a storage yard for Atlantic Broadband. You've probably driven by it 1,000 times and not even noticed it's there, but really what it's been is just a parking lot and a storage yard for many, many years. So to get into what the project is actually going to provide, it's 120 workforce housing units. All 120 units will be workforce. And what workforce housing is defined as in the city code is restricted rents or restricted sales price. In this case, there will be rental between 65% and 140% of area median income. And area median income is established by the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department as adopted by the Florida Community Housing Corporation in a chart that's published every year that basically dictates the amount of rent that you can charge or the amount of a sale price depending on the number of members in a household or the number of bedrooms within the unit. Along with the 120 workforce housing units, there are 6 small commercial units. And those commercial units, the uses of those commercial units are restricted. So what is typically considered nuisance retail, like smoke shops and vape shops, wouldn't be permitted. The idea is to provide like cafes and bookstores or a fitness studio. The height of the project is 70 stories. It's coming in just under 70 feet. We're providing 71 parking spaces, 52 bicycle parking spaces. The floor area, which we're asking for an increase to allow, is 90,198, just over 90,000 square feet. And the unit sizes are between 412 and 690 square feet. So we'll show you some renderings of the project. And it's important to note that at this stage, the project hasn't gone before the design review board, and it would be required to go before the design review board before it can be approved. But this is the proposed design at this early stage. It's a contemporary design using kind of different materials. And we have our architect here. If you guys have any design related questions, we can call him up and have him answer any questions. In general, I think one thing I like to point out is every single unit has a balcony, and it's a pretty modern and relatively attractive design. Here at the ground level, you have the retail units. This is just a bigger rendering from the one you saw on the earlier slide. And then this is what it kind of looks like from the inside, standing on level 5, facing to the south. And then these are the floor plans of the units. There are different types. As you can see, I mean, they are workforce housing units, so they are on the smaller scale, taking advantage of the existing incentives that allow for workforce housing units to be between 400 and 700 square feet. Like I said, the 1-bedroom units are around 412 to 420 square feet, and the 2-bedroom units are 690 to 700 square feet. So the ask in order to make this project possible is that we create this overlay in which only applies when you're providing 100% of the units as workforce housing. And we're requesting that we increase the density from what is permitted today, which is 60 units per acre, to 120 units an acre, with the ability to seek an existing bonus that is in the code today that allows up to an 80% increase in your permitted density. That's what allows us to achieve the 120 units on this roughly slightly larger than half an acre site. We're requesting an increase in the maximum permitted height from what exists today is just 40 feet to 75 feet. Or really what the project is really proposed at around 70, but we're giving ourselves some wiggle room at 75. And it's important to note that in the RM1 zoning that we're surrounded by, the maximum permitted height is actually 50 feet. So while it's a bigger jump than what's permitted in the CD1 district, it's not as big of a jump as what's permitted in the area around us. And it's certainly, we don't feel is out of context with the development that's around us, being that we're surrounded by 2 buildings. We're requesting an increase in the maximum permitted floor area from 1.25 to 3.5. And this is what really allows the square footage for us to be able to build this many units, because at 1.25, there just would not be enough square footage to build a building of this size. And then we're asking for a waiver of parking requirements, but only as it relates to the ground floor commercial units, which are all less than 2,000 square feet. The idea being that these commercial units are for walkable, to create a walkable community, and not as much meant to be an attractor of people that drive their cars to these commercial units. And then as mentioned earlier, the ordinance would prohibit nuisance retail, which includes occult science establishments, smoke and vape shops, liquor stores, or souvenirs and t-shirt shops. So we're trying to limit these retail uses to high quality retail uses that will actually serve the needs of the neighborhood, be a neighborhood amenity. So as Michael kind of described, there's a robust FAR amendment process that the city has adopted. And where we are in the process now is step 2, the community outreach meeting. We've already gone to the planning board once and received some feedback that we're digesting, along with the feedback that we're going to receive today. After today's meeting, we'll be rescheduled to go in front of the planning board again, at which time the planning board will make a recommendation to the city commission. And we'll go to the city commission, have an initial hearing, another community workshop, and that's when the final decision will be made on the ordinance. So we're still early on in this process, but it's important to note that the very beginning of the process requires an infrastructure analysis to confirm that this site and this neighborhood can actually accommodate this project. So with respect to our infrastructure analysis, our traffic engineer, Tom Hall, analyzed the adjacent intersections and found that the project is not going to cause any of the adjacent intersections to fall below the existing required levels of service. So we're not going to create a major traffic problem by introducing these 120 units. And the project will be well served by existing transit lines that run up and down Normandy. Given that we're on the far west side of the city, we're easily accessible to the mainland, just as well as being easily accessible to interior Miami Beach. So the idea being that providing workforce housing in this area will allow people to use transit to get to and from work and be closer to their places of work, rather than living out west or down south where a lot of the workforce housing is concentrated today, the limited workforce housing that exists. With respect to water and sewer, the analysis, we prepared an analysis and it was reviewed by the city's public works department and an independent consultant that the city retained. And they determined that there is enough water in the system, or that the existing water distribution system can accommodate the project. However, some improvements would be required to the sewer infrastructure. And of course, that would be at the developer's cost and expense to make those improvements. We're currently working on kind of determining exactly what those improvements will be. We don't exactly know yet, but we know that certain improvements will be required. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, and please note my email here. If a question comes up that is not able to be answered today, or you think of something later, you can feel free to get in touch with me and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So with that, we'll open it up to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. So now we're going to open up to questions. As Nick stated, what you're going to want to do is click raise your hand on Zoom. If you're on a mobile device, there's 3 dots where you click more and you can see the reactions there, and then go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to ask everybody to try to keep your questions or comments within 2 minutes. We have a few people on the call today, so we just want to make sure, give everybody ample time to speak as well. And just a friendly reminder, as Michael said, this is one of the steps throughout this 6-step process where there's going to be more opportunities for public input. So I'm going to go to our first person with their hand up. It's Paula King. Hey, Paula. Oh, sorry about that, Paula. Hold on, let me unmute you. Hey, Paula.
Hi, how are you today?
Hey, how's it going?
Very well.
Welcome.
Listen, I have a question. In these traffic requirements, have you taken into account the 10,000 units that are going to be activated just across the bridge in North Bay Village? Because, I mean, we can do all the traffic studies that involve Miami Beach, but they're putting 10,000 units into North Bay Village over the next 5 or 6 years. They've already started construction. And this is a big concern to me as a North Beach resident. Are we even going to be able to leave the city on, on the 79th Street Causeway? Or is that going to be completely taken up? I think all of our traffic studies should include that number of 10,000 new units. And I would just like a response to that.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. Nick, I'll turn it over to you if you want to walk us through how those traffic studies work.
So I could ask Tom to be promoted, Tom Hall, our traffic engineer, but as a kind of a basic, I know enough to be dangerous on the traffic engineering
And
side.
yeah, and as you go into that, Tom, if you could just go ahead and raise your hand so we could recognize you. There we go. Perfect.
So
Hey,
Tom,
Tom.
I believe that we are required to take in committed developments into our analysis, correct? And I guess what did we take into account in the analysis?
Well, the questioner has a point. The study is done for the city of Miami Beach. Therefore, it's looking at the committed developments that the city has identified, and to my knowledge, does not look at any traffic from other cities in the area. It's not a regional study, it's a city study.
Okay. So as far as city of Miami Beach, we took into account committed developments
Yes.
approved in Miami Beach, but perhaps we haven't taken into account North Bay Village's approved projects.
No, and for that matter, North Bay Village, I'm sure, has not taken into account anything in Miami Beach in their development review.
Okay. Well, I think that
Great, thank you so much. So next up, and again, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to follow up on, please go ahead and raise your hand, because that way we know how many people are in the queue. Our next person is Daniel Vaitia. Daniel?
Hi, thank you. I just have 3 questions. My first one is, why are you not using the live local or live local ordinance passed by the city, by the state? The second question is, can you fit 3.5 FAR on the site as the rendering shows? Is that showing 3.5 FAR? And what happens if you can't fit the 3.5 FAR that you're seeking? And will this require a citywide referendum, or is this what you're negotiating is trying to bypass the citywide referendum and not go to the maximum of what the local allows? That's my questions.
okay.
Thank you. Turn it over to Nick.
So we're not using the Live Local Act because the Live Local Act would get us around 90 units. It wouldn't get us around 120 units. That's really it. We could proceed with the Live Local Act, get 90 units and build the same exact building. But we're proceeding this way instead because we want to provide the maximum workforce housing that we can on the site. With respect to your question is, can you fit 3.5 FAR? FAR is a function of the property itself. So it's the property's area times 3.5. So yeah, the renderings that you're seeing are approximately 3.5 FAR. I don't know that we're getting exactly all the way to the maximum. I could double check in a moment if you'd like me to get the exact number. But we can fit the building that was shown in the renderings is a pretty much fully designed building subject to design review approval. So we are planning to fit that square footage on the site. And I don't know that we have a contingency if we can't, because we know we can. We have the plan. It exists. And you're asked, will this require a voter referendum? So that question, kind of the reason we are here is because the state preempted the city from being able to require voter referendums. So while the charter currently states that a voter referendum is required, the city is no longer allowed to enforce that provision. So what the city did in reaction to that was adopted this very robust process that requires a lot of community input in order to propose floor area increases. So there's no voter referendum required anymore. What's required is meetings like this and a very detailed and long process for people that want to try to propose at floor area amendments. Hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. And as we go to the next person with their hand up, I'm going to go back to those that spoke just after everyone who hasn't spoke has their hand up. There is a question, there's a Q&A featured, so someone typed in the chat. So this is for Nick. Question about the amount of units that are workforce. In this case, is it 100% workforce? That's
Yes.
one of the ones that they typed in the chat.
Yes, all 100%, all 120 units are workforce.
Great, thanks. We're going to go next to Brandon Lloyd.
Hello, everybody. So I'm
Hey.
speaking as president of the Bay of Vista Condominium Association. We're actually right across the street on Beer Ridge Drive. And I would just like to give the viewers a little bit of history about this project. So this project was actually approved 2 years ago. Since then, it's doubled in size. So the height has gone up, the number of units has gone up. It's completely out of scope with the surrounding area. So right now we have a maximum of 40 or 50 feet. They want to take it up to 75 feet, which, like I said, is completely out of scope with the current development that we have now on Normandy Isles. They call this workforce housing, but at $2,000 a month for a 400 square foot, 1-bedroom unit, I mean, that's upper middle class, first of all. And second of all, it's like a New York City style living. It's super small. And they're trying to cram 120 apartments in, but only 71 parking spaces. So when you add all this up, so we want to fit 120 micro units, super small units for $2,000 a month. And we expect a single person to be able to afford this. That's a waiter or, let's say, works in hospitality. It's a ridiculous assumption. But furthermore, to only give 71 parking spaces for 120 units makes no sense. We already have 0 parking in Normandy Isles. Like I said, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association right across the street. I fight for parking every day when I come home from work. So I know this personally. I'm speaking on a personal level. So, you might say that, oh, the project is great. We're giving workforce housing. But I think giving all the height variances and all the special exceptions, all the variances, that reduction in parking that's being asked for, it's not a good benefit for us residents. It's really not. And my last point is that any decision makers or anybody on the planning board that's listening, in my opinion, any concerned citizen should go on June 25th to the planning board and oppose this.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. And I'm going to go to our next person that has their hand up. I have Mr. Johan Moore. And Nick, if there's anything that you want to touch on as we go through our questions or callers, just let me know as well, and I'll make sure to go back to you. I'm going to go to Johan Moore.
Good evening. I should say that is not my neighborhood. I don't want to speak in favor of or against the proposal, but I did have a couple of questions. I very much echo a specific comment that was just made by one of the neighbors. Affordable housing is a different category from workforce housing, but affordable housing, as our past mayor, Matty Bauer, has pointed out, is by definition workforce housing. My two questions are, one to the developer, can you briefly comment on what green features you have incorporated or might incorporate? This is from me wearing my hat as an appointee to the Sustainability Committee, such as green roof. I had to step out for a moment. You might have spoken about storm sewer arrangements. I'm sorry if I missed that. Rooftop solar would be an interesting question, if you might address that as a possibility. And I think maybe more for Michael Belush, and I don't know if that's appropriate for this evening, but for your thinking cap, how might this proposal or comparable proposals apply to, say, our neighborhood, or what preclusions might pop up should it be presented to be considered? I know that we have our own overlay that my neighborhood, Flamingo Park neighborhood, is attempting to institute in order to protect our neighborhood scale. And 75 feet is in fact the city's negotiating position, whereas ours is rather lower. So a couple of questions, whoever would like to answer, whatever of those would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I'm gonna turn it over to Nick. And Nick, before you dive into those, I have a Karen Dax. Is that part of your team that you'd like unmuted?
She's not part of our team.
Okay, all right. So Karen, we'll get to you in a bit once we go through our questions and answers. You're in line. All right, so go ahead.
So can we promote add-on funds? Can our architect raise their hand and touch upon any green elements? At this early stage, I think it's a good question. It's something that we haven't exactly implemented into the project yet or discussed. So Add-on, have we added any green elements?
We have some, I'm not sure if you can hear, but we have some features. We have the covered parking, which is part of green standards. We also have the open corridors, which are freeing us up from using AC ventilation. We also have windows that are larger for the room sizes, so they allow for greater light inside the units. We're looking at energy appliances. It's kind of early in the project, but our roof would also be high reflective, probably a single ply membrane that would be good for energy. We always try to introduce green concepts into our projects, but this is like a preliminary or early stage of the project. So as we develop, it's something that we can definitely incorporate. But yes, that would be something that we want to promote. Again, it's the design of the project is really for being in an urban neighborhood, being able to walk. We have the bicycle parking. We want to promote more walking and bicycle use. And one of the things with the cars is we want to promote less use of cars, which is also part of being green, or heading into that sustainable aspect. So that's where we're at today.
What I'll add to that is, Kevin, I'll just add that the resiliency code has significant resiliency and sustainability requirements. There's an urban heat island ordinance that requires high albedo surfaces and permeability. There's minimum green building certification standards. All of these things that are going to have to kind of fall in line as this project moves forward. As far as elements like rooftop solar, I think that would be great. Those do have a significant cost, and anything that has a significant cost like that, of course, gets passed on to the end users, and then it kind of limits the workforce housing component of the project. So it's a give and take with resiliency and affordability.
Great, thanks. We have quite a few people that still have their hand up, so I'm gonna go next. Natasha, I see you had a question in the Q&A feature regarding parking, but you're actually up. So Natasha, if you could state your full name for us.
Hi, Natasha Diaz.
Hey there.
Hi. I did make a question on the Q&A. I'm a resident of Normandy Shores, and parking is already an issue just to be able to go to our local restaurants or even anything around the area, especially on the weekends. Is there any parking plan that was made? I know you guys did a traffic study, but was there like a parking study made? Because I know that one of the requirements you guys are asking for is to remove parking on the bottom floor, I saw.
Yeah, so we don't have a parking study of the neighborhood. I think it'd probably be a good idea, and we're definitely hearing loud and clear a lot of people mentioning parking. Just to correct one thing, we're not asking for a waiver of parking completely on the ground level. The ground level will primarily be parking. What we're asking for is a waiver of the parking requirements for the commercial units, which are all less than 2,000 square feet. So it's about 15 or 16 spaces that would be required, that we're asking to not be required. But
Thank
there will
you.
be 71 parking spaces.
Thank you. Also in the chat that we'll provide to you afterwards, there is another comment just about parking and the lack of parking in the area. I don't see that person that has their hand up. So I'm going to go to the next caller. It's Laura Vaitia. Hi, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. My question is with regards, and actually more of a comment, but as I understand it, the city recently changed the zoning in for workforce housing. So they are actually giving an 80% bonus on density when you build for workforce housing. And in this case, you would take what would be allowed there if it were RM1 of 35 units, and you would get somewhere around 60 units, which is what you had approved before. If I understand correctly, you mentioned that with Live Local, you would be able to fit 90 units, which already triples the number of units if this were an RM1 property. What you're proposing is actually quadrupling the number of units for what would be allowed there as RM1. And currently the zoning here is actually like a CD1. It's like a very low density commercial zoning. So you are seeking quite a bit of density, and on top of that, an increase in the square footage. So the square footage alone is giving you 3 times the size of the building over what you would have been able to build there if it was just an RM1. That's a lot of density. So why are you not taking the Live Local, which would give you 90 units, and not propose such a high density?
So you are correct. We are CD1, permits 60 units an acre, and the 80% density bonus exists today, and we could take it off of 60 units an acre. And that's what's been done already. We have an approved project that I think is like 66 units or so. Not all of them are workforce. What this is an attempt to provide 100% workforce housing and a significant amount of units to try to actually start making a dent in that 90,000 unit shortfall. So we could go the Live Local route and do 90 units. It's not as much of an increase from the project that's already approved. So it becomes a business decision as to whether that will go forward with Live Local or just build the project that's already approved. But what this is trying to get as many units as possible, what we can reasonably fit on the site. What we believe is not out of scale or context with North Beach.
Great. Next up, we have Karen Dax.
Hi, this is Karen Dax. I'm also here with my husband, Augustine Salas. We're actually architect and interior designer. Just kind of recapping really quickly a couple of things that I've heard, which I completely agree with. I think there needs to be a traffic study that looks at North Bay Village developments and Miami Beach, because North Bay Village is right next door. And there's a lot going on, and there's a lot more coming. So I think that's super important. I also think I second the motion of parking being very challenging in this area. Whenever we have guests coming over after, say, 7 o'clock in the evening, it's really hard for them to find parking. And just overall density, the fact that it's going to be 120 possible units and 72 spaces means we're not helping the problem, we're adding to it. So that's my side, and then my husband's gonna.
Yeah, and the other part is, how do you see this transition from a very low family-oriented neighborhood to a more like a more density-oriented, which is probably will be the first building with that level of density in the area. What are the benefits for the community? Is the community really getting something from this new development, or are you trying to set a new standard for development in the area? Is this project having like a real urban proposal for the community of the Normandy Island that really can people really engage with this project? That's my suggestion. You should think about it because you have to have a really core values to share to the people that is living in this island. And the majority of the people is basically families, and families is single families, and the other rest is basically is just rental buildings with no more than three levels.
Thank you for the floor.
Great, thank you, Mr. and
Comments.
Mrs. Dax. So we're gonna go over to Nick, if you have any responses or comments on there.
I think it was mostly commentary, but to the question as to, have we thought about this being contextual with the neighborhood? Again, we feel that this is contextual. Town center is not too far. There's a lot of new development coming to North Beach. The existing pattern of low scale 2-story buildings may not necessarily be the pattern of the future. And as far as public benefit, certainly, I think providing housing so that new people, young people, people that maybe are not established family yet, can live in the area is a benefit to those people and to the community, to grow the community and not just keep it the same with the same demographic.
Thank you. I'm gonna go next up to Amy DeSanson. Amy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hi there. I'm a resident of Normandy Isle near Bay Drive and Calais. And I wanted to know if the developer is aware of the chronic flooding on Bay Drive. This is very close to the project. Marseille, Calais, this is during the king tide events and the rain events, because I can attest, as the others do, to the shortage of parking, street parking. And when we get those rain events and king tides, the parking is really reduced that much further. I don't know, when the city will be able to help us with the flooding, but I don't know if you've taken that into account. And then one other comment, as a resident here, I do believe myself that the height of 7 floors that building would be a bit out of context with the neighboring area. Thank you.
In terms of flooding, we have taken into account in the design of the building. The design of the building is going to be above flood elevation +1, I believe. So it's a resilient design, and then our parking level as well. Certainly we can't be solving the flooding problems on Bay Drive in Marseille, but looking forward to solutions to those problems.
Thank you so much. We have another one of the questions in the chat, and I'm trying to go back and forth. And if you, Nick, if you have the chat open, you'll be able to see them as well. So Allison Atterbury, she states she's a resident of Normandy Isle, has some concerns about traffic and parking, but ultimately her question is, can more than one person live in the apartment, example, married couple or roommates?
So
So the question, yeah, I guess it's really, can multiple people live in one unit? Are there any, I guess, rules for the number of people living in the unit, or is that something that's going to be set forth later at a later time?
I'd have to look into that. I think that I don't know the answer to that question. I think that there's probably a limit on the number of occupants. Typically it's 2. Michael, I see you unmuted. I don't know if you have the answer to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, thanks, guys. I think the workforce housing element of the city code does require that the city commission set set the rents as well as the occupancy limitation based upon the size of the unit. So that's something that would be established by the city commission in the future.
Thank you. Next up, we have screen name is Test. If you could state your full name for us. Just have to
About
unmute.
that.
Oh,
Sorry
can you hear
about
me?
that. I was
No,
unmuting.
you're
Yeah,
back.
hi.
Hey,
Gabe Snyman, 1500 block of Normandy Drive.
perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm just letting you know about the scale of the projects that are happening in North Bay Village. Sunbeam Properties, the owners of Channel 7, are planning on building 11 towers in North Bay Village. 11 towers. Channel 7 is going to be moving to Broward County, and the traffic is going to be a complete nightmare. The other comment I have is that being so close to Normandy Isle Park and Pool, whenever there's an event at the park, there's parking issues on the 1500 block and basically all around the park. And so I don't see how things are going to get any better if you think that it's very idealistic to think that people are going to be just taking the buses and walking and biking when we all know that this is a car-centric city. That's the reality of it. And people are going to need parking spaces. And there's going to be more than one person per unit that's going to need a parking space. So what are you going to do about it? Are we going to be overcrowded here on the west end of the island? Are we going to have traffic problems and construction problems? What are you going to do? What's the story? That's all.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to give the team any opportunity to answer. I do have another question in the chat as well in respect to how many workforce housing units would be required under Live Local. Not sure if that's something that Michael, you would have, or Nicholas.
The Live Local Act requires 40% of the units to be workforce housing units. The rest can be market rate. So it's an important distinction between the Live Local Act project and this project. 100% of the units would be workforce. Live Local would only require 40% of those 90 units to be workforce.
Okay, great. And then we have screen name is Liliana's iPhone. If you could state your full name for us.
You hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Can you hear us?
My name is Liliana Sordo. I live in Biscayne Point. I've been here for quite a few years. And again, I'm trying to get more involved in this because I'm seeing this getting more crowded and congested. And some person there just deviated the whole question about how they were going to help by that one thing didn't get wasn't what Miami Beach the studies about the backup and whatever in Miami Beach were not the same, didn't concern the ones in North Bay Village, and they do because we're all connected. So we keep on building these structures, and you're giving this excuse that it's some kind of thing to help for the average person, the income. That income is coming up higher. And anyway, a building, a little apartment for 2,000 square feet at $2,000, whatever, for 400 square feet at $2,000, that's ridiculous. Who's going to pay for that? Who are we really helping here other than making money for the person who's building it? I'm sorry, I don't have all the terminology as everyone else. I'm a pharmacist. I'm a concerned person because I keep on seeing all these structures that are huge being built in this area. And we're jam-packed in here. This is becoming like New York City. And that's what I think this is trying to get to. Little by little, you're getting it higher and higher. These people in Normandy Isle, they don't have any chance to park and have, we have traffic all the time with what we have now. And there's more buildings here getting constructed on our end and on their end. So what are we trying to do here? Make a freaking New York City out of here also? That's my concern.
Thank you, Liliana, for sharing those concerns. Let me just look through our questions. And I see, Paula, I know you were one of our first up. So I'm going to just give you a minute to follow up because you had a little bit of time left. And Paula? Not sure if you wanted to follow up on anything. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I do.
Hey, perfect.
And thank you for letting me speak again. I want to say this, and I really feel this is a dangerous precedent. Every single developer that has a project in North Beach completely ignores our FAR requirements, and this is a huge ask. It's asking for double the height and double the FAR, double the density. So I think that this project sets a precedent for all of the areas of North that are not included in town center, which town center has already gone far beyond what we ever requested in the charrettes or what anything that came up. Thank you, Ricky Ariola. But so now this is the residential neighborhoods, shall we say, or the much lower density neighborhoods. And what's happening is not only are we okaying additional FAR, we're setting a huge precedent that if one developer gets the additional FAR, then they all will say, well, he got it, so I need it. And this is how these things go. And you end up with an overdense neighborhood. And I don't think anybody in North Beach wants that and is willing to live with that. So my feeling is watch what we approve here, because it's not going to work out for us at all. And someone's going to get very wealthy and move on. And we as a neighborhood are going to be suffering through this. That was my comment. And I still have 30. Oh, I guess I've gone
No, a
over.
little over, but
I'm
thank you,
sorry for
Paula. No,
raving,
I
but I
appreciate
want
it.
everyone to
Thanks.
be aware of it.
Thank you, Paula. Just wanted to give you some time there to finish up your thought. Okay, so our last person with their hand up, Natasha, I think you also had spoken earlier, but I know it sounded like you had an extra question and we didn't get to, so I'm going to go back to Natasha. And then after that, we're going to hear from Michael Bernstein. If you could just remind us what are the next steps and where we are in this process and those public input opportunities. I'm going to go to Natasha first. Natasha?
Hi, yes, thank you for coming back around. I had a second part of question. I know you mentioned that since it's workforce housing and we are not, and we're planning on using public transportation, which would be great. However, the 112 route was already, it's no longer existing. And then I checked also the Miami-Dade routes and it would be 79th, but it doesn't stop in Normandy Isles. So what is the plan for public transportation, or are you guys going to update a plan for that?
I saw
Great.
your message, and certainly we have to look into the routes that are available. And if we need to, we can petition Miami-Dade County to make sure that there is a stop here. Certainly if there's not a stop, there should be. I would have to see what the current routes are. We have to update that.
Great, thank you so much. So with that, that's going to conclude our questions and answers for this evening. So I'm going to give Michael an opportunity. If you could just walk us again through where we are in this six-step process and what's next and those public input points where everyone on the call today, if you expressed any concerns, if you feel your question might not have been answered, you could go ahead and participate further in this process. Michael?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. And before we begin, I just want to clarify one point in terms of one question that was asked, I think by Mr. Moore. Whatever happens today for this project or this site, this does not impact and doesn't automatically increase the FAR anyplace else. The proposal here for today is only for this specific site for 1960 Normandy Drive. In terms of the process, the next step is reviewed by the planning board on June 25th. The planning board is going to review this again. They're going to take into consideration this public comment, including any updates that the developer may want to provide to the planning board. And the planning board is going to give a recommendation to the city commission. It's either going to be for or against with modifications. So anybody speaking today is also welcome to attend and provide feedback directly to the planning board meeting, the planning board members. And that will be on June 25th. The meeting starts at 10 a.m. After that, this will go to the city commission. The date has not been set yet for the city commission. Most likely it won't be before the city commission until probably September. And then after the September meeting, there'll be another community workshop meeting. And people are also welcome to provide comment, not only at the workshop or the community outreach meeting, they're also going to be welcome to provide comment at the first commission meeting. And then there'll be the community outreach meeting and then followed up by the final city commission. until the city commission adopts, any proposed changes, nothing is approved. So there's this whole process is to solicit public comment and input from members of the public. And during this whole process, I'm sure the developer will be responding and taking into consideration comments given regarding review of the transportation study and review of how that's impacted by units in North Bay Village, as well as any comments provided by the planning board. And I don't know if Nick Rodriguez wants to provide any closing comments as well for himself.
Before we go back to Nick, actually Commissioner Tanya Bott has her hand up, so I'm gonna go to Commissioner Bott.
Hi, I'm actually just calling in as a resident of that neighborhood, not as a commissioner. I just want to say I've been active in stuff like this for quite some time. And while technically this proposal may apply just to this this project, what we know and have seen with unfortunate results is that when one is allowed, others will follow. So I think, and I don't want to put my finger on the scale one way or the other, that's not my role here now, but I think there needs to be a lot of work done to answer some very important questions and to make sure that this is a project that we want in a neighborhood that caters to the needs of the demographics and not without burdening the neighborhood with quite undesirable side effects. And so I would just urge everybody to keep asking questions and the proposers to find answers that either satisfy or don't, whatever that may be. But this notion of this is just for this project is that's never how it works out. So just everybody factor that in as you take your questions and look for the answers that will be provided. Thanks.
So with that, I mean, in closing, guys, I would say thank you for your time. We certainly have our work cut out for us to kind of go back to the drawing board. We appreciate your time this evening, and the one thing we'll say is workforce housing, it's a difficult problem. It certainly requires from the people that have homes. It's easy to criticize others that are trying to provide homes for those who don't. But if we don't do something to address this issue, the state has already told us that we're going to end up with statewide zoning. So I think I would consider it from that realm as well before passing and making decisions as to what you're going to do. So thank you all for your time. We're going to go back and consider all your comments. I wrote in 3 pages of notes here of questions and comments, and we'll be digesting that and going back to the planning board in June. So good night, everyone. Thank you.